The storm had rolled in suddenly, swallowing the sky in a shroud of restless gray. Rain hammered against the windshield of his car, each drop a sharp reminder of the chaos both outside and within. The wipers fought desperately, pushing water aside and wide, jerking arcs, but the downpour blurred everything. Streetlights, signs, even his own reflection in the glass. He should have gone straight home. He usually did. His evenings were quiet, predictable, often filled with the hum of his old refrigerator and the silence of rooms far too empty for one man. But the storm was relentless, pressing him into unfamiliar choices. He spotted the soft neon glow of a diner sign at the edge of town, a beacon of warmth in the darkness. And before he realized it, his hands had already turned the wheel. Inside, the diner was a different world. The overhead lights glowed warmly, bouncing off chrome fixtures and polished counters. The smell of coffee and fried food hung in the air, comforting in its simplicity. A faint tune played on the jukebox in the corner, though the storm outside was loud enough to almost drown it out. He wasn't a man who lingered in such places. The cheerfulness of strangers had never appealed to him. He preferred the quiet of his thoughts, even if those thoughts sometimes weighed him down like stones. But that night, soaked to the bone and desperate for reprieve, he had no choice. He stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. Droplets clung stubbornly. The fabric plastered him like a second skin. He glanced around quickly, hoping not to draw much attention. The diner was nearly empty, save for a trucker nursing a late-night meal at one booth and a pair of students bent over textbooks at another. And her. The young woman behind the counter moved with ease, balancing trays, refilling cups, clearing plates. She carried herself with an unassuming grace that caught him off guard. Her smile, bright despite the late hour and the humdrum of the place, lit her face in a way the overhead bulbs couldn't. When their eyes met, something shifted inside him. It wasn't a simple spark of fleeting attraction, the kind he had known and dismissed in the past. This was different. Her gaze carried warmth, an unspoken kindness that tugged at something buried deep within him. He made his way to the counter, his steps awkward, hurried, as though his body had betrayed his mind. Reaching for a seat, he accidentally knocked over a small stack of laminated menus. They clattered against the linoleum floor, breaking the fragile silence. Heat crept up his neck as he bent to gather them. "Careful, sir," she teased, leaning forward with that same playful glint in her eyes. "You might break something." Her voice was soft but lively, carrying a note of innocence that pierced through the heaviness he had been carrying. Simple words, yet they made his chest tighten, his heart stumble in its rhythm. He looked up, meeting her eyes again, and for a brief second, the storm outside seemed to fade. The world narrowed to just the two of them, the clumsy man dripping rainwater onto the diner floor, and the woman smiling at him like he was more than just another passing stranger. He introduced himself, his voice rough and shy, sounding foreign even to his own ears. She smiled in response, and he learned her name, Emily. The syllables felt soft on his tongue, as if they belonged to a story he hadn't yet read, but already wanted to know by heart. In that moment, something inside him shifted. He had walked into the diner, seeking only shelter from the storm, but instead, he had stumbled into a possibility he hadn't dared to hope for in years. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm he hadn't known he craved. The storm that first night had long since passed, but he kept returning to the diner as though tethered by something stronger than routine. At first, he told himself it was coincidence he was in the area. He needed a hot meal. He was just avoiding the silence of his apartment. But deep down, he knew the truth. He came for her. Emily. She was more than just the woman behind the counter. She was laughter spilling out at the smallest of his jokes, even the ones he barely dared to tell. She was patience when he stumbled over his words, and curiosity when he finally opened up. She asked questions, but never pried. She listened, but never judged. Her kindness wasn't performance. It was simply who she was. Sometimes they spoke for only minutes, short exchanges over steaming cups of coffee. Other times, their conversation stretched until the jukebox played its last song and the lights dimmed low. She told him about her childhood, about growing up in a family where money was scarce but love was abundant. She confessed her worries about her grandmother's failing health, her sense of responsibility heavy but unspoken. In return, he shared pieces of himself he hadn't dared reveal to anyone in years. His estranged family, the job that consumed him but left him empty, the long echo of a lost love that still haunted the corners of his apartment like a ghost. With her, vulnerability didn't feel like weakness. It felt like release. And slowly, piece by piece, he realized something extraordinary. In Emily's presence, the weight he carried grew lighter. But life, as it often does, shifted without warning. One evening, he entered the diner to find not her smile waiting, but a folded note left on the counter. His name wasn't on it, but he knew it was for him. She was leaving. Her grandmother's illness had worsened, and Emily was moving out of state to care for her. The words blurred as he read them, his hands trembling. A cold panic surged through him, raw and suffocating. He hadn't confessed his feelings. He hadn't told her how much she had changed him, how much light she had brought into his shadowed world. That night, he sat alone in the diner long after closing, staring at the empty seat where she used to stand, where her laughter had once filled the silence. The storm had returned, rain lashing against the windows, echoing the storm inside him. He couldn't let her leave without knowing. Driven by something between desperation and hope, he found himself at her apartment. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, water streaming into his eyes as the wipers of his car fought uselessly against the downpour. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a mixture of fear and longing. When Emily opened the door, suitcase half-packed behind her, surprise flickered across her face. She looked tired, burdened by responsibility, yet still the same woman whose smile had undone him. "I can't let you leave without knowing," he blurted, his voice breaking under the weight of honesty. "You've changed my life. These weeks, just these weeks with you, have meant more to me than I can explain." Her eyes widened, shock and confusion giving way to something softer. He stepped closer, hesitant yet unable to stop himself. "I've been running from people, from life, from myself. But you," his throat tightened, "you made me want to stay, to believe I might still be worth the risk of being hurt again." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady drum of rain. Then Emily reached out, her hand brushing against his. The touch was light, almost casual, yet it carried the weight of fate. "You're not as fragile as you think," she whispered, her words teasing, tender, steady. And just like that, something within him broke open, not into pieces, but into possibility. They talked for hours that night. Not the polite exchanges of diner small talk, but deep, unguarded honesty. She told him of her sacrifices, of how she'd given up her own dreams to care for her family. He told her his regrets, the mistakes that gnawed at him, and the longing for connection he had buried under cynicism. By the time dawn stretched its pale light across the horizon, they had woven together a bond fragile in its newness, yet unshakable in its truth. The following days were bittersweet. He helped her prepare for her move, each box packed with urgency, and each glance heavy with unspoken meaning. Their moments together were fleeting, tinged with the ache of something too short-lived. On the day of her departure, he drove her to the edge of town. The streets were still slick from rain, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. He tried to steady his voice as he said, "Go on, take care of your grandmother. But don't forget us, don't forget me." Tears glistened in her eyes as she nodded. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his, a gesture that spoke more than words ever could. "I won't forget," she whispered. "I could never forget." And then she was gone. Days later, he returned to the diner, not expecting her, but drawn back by habit, by memory, by hope. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside, his chest tight. And there she was, seated at the counter, a smile lighting her face as if the world itself had shifted to allow them this second chance. Emily had returned, not because he begged, not because of desperate pleas, but because of what they had built together: trust, kindness, patience. From then on, their lives intertwined in ways neither could have foreseen. They shared laughter that shook away the shadows, carried each other through hardships, and celebrated the ordinary victories that suddenly felt extraordinary. The storm that had once mirrored his turmoil faded into memory. In its place came sunny mornings, quiet evenings, and the steady knowledge that love wasn't perfection. Love was presence. Love was care. Love was the courage to believe again. And sometimes, when he caught her teasing smile across the diner counter, he would hear her words echo in his mind. "Careful, sir. You might break something." And he would smile, knowing the only thing she had truly broken was a wall around his heart, leaving it wide open for love, for kindness, and for the miracles life sometimes delivers when you least expect them.